Hello, tarot trainee. Good to see you here. Can you hear me and see me okay? For anyone else who's out there? Make sure we're all working. Give a few minutes for people to show up. And of course, ask questions. So, tarot trainee, have you been following the whole astrology study series, or is this your first pop-up joining? Let me know, those who are coming in. I can see the numbers going up. Yeah, if you have any questions. So we've covered the signs, the planets, and the houses, and then I did a little retrograde video yesterday, just talking about the time frames of retrogrades. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, submit them. Anything you'd like me to review or specific questions. And then I thought we could look at sample charts for Halloween, hence the black and orange theme and my, oops, wrong side, my witch is there. Everything's backwards when I do lives. Hey, Tarot Stash, Gerald. First time watching, thank you. Or any general questions on astrology you might have, put them in the chat, let me know. And then I thought I'd talk about, because the last, hi, Joanna. Oh, thank you. It's funny because we get really strong winds in autumn. And so there's a lot of static electricity in the air. So when I comb it, it goes poof. So I'm like, keep wetting it down. Otherwise my hair would just frizz out. So I thought we'd talk about layering the houses a little bit because I mentioned that in the house video. Hi, World Bridger. Great, lots of people coming in. So I'm assuming you can all hear me okay. So just pop in questions in the chat. Again, generally about astrology, Western or Vedic, or on the signs, planets and houses that I did, or the retrograde video from yesterday. So just let me know. Just trying to think where to start. I just want to wait for people to show up. Hi, Goliath soulmate. First time. Thanks for being here. Okay. So no questions coming in yet. I'll talk about layering the houses a bit. Layering the houses. So if you don't know what the 12 houses in astrology are, after this, if you have time today or whenever, go back and watch the video on the 12 houses, where I give a rundown of what they mean or what they symbolize or what are the 12 houses. And I mentioned in that video where you can layer the houses to get more layers, literally more layers of meaning. And this is not the same as divisional charts in Vedic astrology. That's a more complex, calculated type of thing where kind of the houses are peeled apart. That's simplifying it. But I do have a video where I talk about divisional charts, and I'll link that when this is over and uploaded in the comments. I just can't do it beforehand. Tarot Stat, yeah. Have you created a playlist? Yes. So the playlist is astrology studies, and I just added it to my channel page. So just go there and you can find the playlist. The playlist is also linked in the description below, and then it will be pinned at the top of the comments. Again, once this is processed and uploaded, and I can do that once YouTube lets me do that. Okay. So layering the houses. So I'm going to hold up, this is the sample random from a moon in August, sample Vedic chart. And I'm going to do this because I'll show in both systems. So I have a Western chart here too. Because it's whole sign, whole house, sunbeams in my eyes. It makes it easier to visualize, at least for me. So World Bridger, can you talk a bit about a Saturn return and a Saturn opposition happening on? Yes. I'll do that next, now that I've started this. So layering the houses. Actually, I'll hold up a Western chart because most of you are probably familiar with that more than Vedic. And we'll just look at the whole sign. So Aquarius, Pisces, Aries. Yeah, it's backwards on lives, right? So I'm always like, where am I going? Look at it that way. So if we say, let's just pretend all of Taurus is the first house, even though this is in the chart, but just to simplify here, Taurus first house, Gemini second, Cancer third. One way to layer the houses to look at time in people's lives is to see first house as first year, second year, third, fourth, fifth year. So the first it's backwards on, okay, first 12 years of one's life. And then first house then is your 13th year, second house, your 14th year, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and so on. So you can look at each year of your life by looking at that house. So let's say 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's say someone is 5 years old. Keep it simple. Fifth house, 5 years old. You then look at this house as the first house for that year of the life, and then you can look at how the transits lay on the chart that way. So that's a way of layering the houses to look at each individual year of life. I don't really do that often, but it is an interesting thing to look at sometimes. And I think it came up when I did my Vedic Astrology series on Lavender Moon's channel, because we were looking at the British royals. And I looked at that layering with Harry and I think William's chart too, and how it aligned with the year that their mother, Princess Diana, died. So it's an interesting thing. It's not something I typically do, but it can be insightful, especially in retrospect, because you're probably studying your own charts if you're really getting into this, right? And people you know who are close to you. And in retrospect, looking back and say, oh, let me look at, back when I was 20 and what does the chart show? And you can get insight into, especially if you look back on challenging years of your life, like, oh, wow, Saturn was here then in that chart and transiting this, and that totally makes sense. So that's, it's more, I use it more for insight in that way to look back in retrospect, but you can also do it looking ahead. Like, let's say you want to move home or something in 2 years, and whatever age that might be, let's just say, pretend that this is the house that would be the house for your age in 2 years. And then you can look at that chart and see there's like the fourth house from that, 1, 2, 3, 4, indicate with the transits. So you need an ephemeris. There's online ones too, or you have a program. The programs are expensive, and see if it looks good to move house that year. So that's a way you can do it on top of the transits on your natal chart without layering it. Does that make sense? Am I making sense to you guys? Let me know. So that's one way to layer a chart. Another way to layer, here, I'll just mix it up and hold up a Vedic chart. So Vedic charts, if you watch the house video, if not, I go into this. The first house is here, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and so on around the chart. Cool, thank you. Another way to layer it, pseudo layer it. So let's say so I've gotten this question a few times, usually with Vedic charts. Someone asking about their mother-in-law. So mother-in-law, and I didn't say this in the house videos really, but mother-in-law or in-laws fall in your 8th house typically, because the 8th house is the second house from your 7th house, and the 7th house is house of spouse or partner, and the next house from any house is the gains you get from that previous house. So that gives you an insight into one way of layering. So, okay, so let's do it this way. You have your 7th house of relationships here. So 7th house in a Western chart is the one opposite the first house. If you're going by the house numbers in the center, there's different styles of Western charts too. I talk about that a little bit in some other videos. But let's say 7th house of relationship. And you want to look at your own birth chart concerning your partner, spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever you're partnered with in some way. It could even be a business partner or even a best friend, right? You look at this house concerning, we'll just say partner. This is the house of your partner. This becomes the first house concerning your partner in your chart. The next house, the 8th house in your chart, becomes the second house concerning your partner. So this becomes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. Oops, backwards, so on in your chart to look at your partner. It's not as perfect as looking at your partner's chart for that person, but it's your partner in relation to you. and that relationship. So another thing you can do is, let's say, so a lot of people like ask about their parents and they'll be like, oh, my mom or my dad wants a chart reading, but they were born in a time or in a location where they didn't put down birth time, right? So there's ways to rectify a chart, but another way to do it is to look at your own chart. And fourth house is house of mother. And so this becomes the first house for looking at your mother in your chart. So first house, second, third, fourth, fifth, and so on. So in a Western chart, you can see the numbers in the middle. Fourth house would be mother. So first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and so on, all the way around the chart. So it's like an impression of another person, or even this, could even be a situation, but usually people ask about people, an impression of the other person in relation to your life. And again, it's not their birth chart. That would give the ultimate information, right? But it is a way to look at those other people if you don't have their birth data, or they didn't want their chart read, or, I always say it's good to have permission. So that's a second way to layer a chart. The next way is kind of how I mentioned with in-laws. If you want to look, like someone asks about my mother-in-law, it's usually mother-in-law. Mother-in-law is 8th house. Now, typically 8th house is the esoteric, the occult, metaphysical, secrets, death, transformation. I mean, you think like, why are in-laws in the 8th house? Because it's the second house from the 7th, right? It's second. So second house in a chart. Second house is house of money, gains, and finances. Various forms of gains and material things. So in-laws are something you gain from your partner. A common one I do bring up is 11th house, and that applies both systems, right? So here's 10th house, whoops, wrong way, and 11th house. 11th house is a social house. It's friends, acquaintances, your network, but it's also house of gains from your career, because it's the second house from your 10th house of career. So career, next house, what you gain from it. So this next house from everything is what you gain from it. The third house from everything is the ways that you communicate concerning that, because third house is communication. Fourth house, so if you just learn the houses, fourth house is home, family, property. So you could say, how does my relationship affect my family? So you look at your house of relationship, your partner, and you count 4 away inclusively. You always count inclusively. I don't know if I mentioned that before. First, so 7th house, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you'd look at the 10th house as 4th from the 7th to look at how your relationship impacts your family. Now, that doesn't mean you don't look at your 4th house of family as well, but it gives another layer. It doesn't replace the birth chart, is like first and foremost, top notch. The layering, again, are extra layers of information. So that's 3 ways to layer a chart. Okay, any questions? Anything confusing there? So I'll show that on a Western chart. So same thing, how does my relationship affect my career? So 10th house of career. So you count 10 from the 7th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this is where you look at how your relationship is affecting your career, as well as your 10th house of career. I don't know if I counted that right. It's hard to do it on camera. So again, interesting extra layers of information, but also default ways of looking at things if you don't have charts for other people or even other events. You can find everything from your natal chart. And that's why I really stress, the foundational stuff, like my book, the Shedding Light on Jyotisha, Vedic Astrology for Beginners. Learn this stuff, and you can read all other fancy calculated charts that you can pull up. Work through the layers. Now, I don't go through the layering in my book because I feel like that's beyond the foundations, but I wanted to start adding it here as I go through the series. Thank you, World Bridger. Okay, so back to, you had a question. Let me pop that up. Oh, I just saw your icon like bigger. Now I can see what it is. Very cool. Can you talk a bit on Saturn return and a return opposition happening in one's natal chart? Okay, so Saturn return is when Saturn returns to where Saturn was in your natal chart, which is a map of your moment of birth. So it's a map for your life. So in my sample chart here, Saturn is up here. And this is just a chart for the moon, but let's pretend this is your birth chart and Saturn is here in Aquarius in your natal chart. So when the transits normally would be out here, I just didn't print those up. When the Saturn, oh, that's backwards, sorry, on screen. When Saturn in the sky returns to the same position that it was when you were born, that is a Saturn return. So that happens every 28 to 30 years. In Vedic astrology, it's considered, so Saturn in this chart is here. It's considered when Saturn is in this entire house, no matter what the degrees, right? So when Saturn transits a house or a sign, it's whole house. So house sign is the same thing. Approximately 2.5 years, sometimes a little longer, sometimes a little less, depends on retrogrades. In Western astrology, it's usually considered within an orb, and an orb is a number of degrees on either side. So this Saturn is at 13 degrees. I usually give a 10-degree orb, so from 3 to 23 degrees, I would consider your Saturn return. But potentially you would feel the effects when it's in this entire house. Now, from a Western perspective, because you can see the houses are different sizes, the Saturn return might, the feeling or the effects of it might feel shorter for one person versus the next. So what does Saturn represent? That's what you have to, for those who are really studying, look at when it comes to looking at Saturn return. So Saturn represents diligence, hard work, patience, slowing things down, obstacles, challenges. He's called the Great Malefic, but it doesn't mean he's all bad. Those things are, being disciplined and patient and hardworking are virtues, right? But when we want things to happen quickly, when we want things to happen smoothly, and we don't want to be patient, and we don't want to have to figure out why that obstacle and challenge is in our way, then it's very frustrating. So Saturn's also called the karmic lord. He's teaching us lessons. And so during a Saturn return, most people feel the heaviness of Saturn. So Saturn's metal is lead, is very heavy. It accentuates all that Saturn represents. Now, he also represents foundations and stability and long-term energy. I have like sunbeams on my face. And long-term energy. Does that work? They'll move. And so through being patient, through being disciplined, through learning those karmic lessons, through whatever challenges and obstacles come up, you lay a solid foundation for the next Saturn cycle, so the next 28 to 30 years. And you build upon that. So the first Saturn return, people are in their late 20s. They're usually done with school. We'll just say typically done with school, pressure to get married or have kids or this and that, settle down, establish yourself, right? Establishing Saturn energy. And for people, because of their personality, circumstances, whatever, who resist that, not that you have to get married then or settle down then, but who resist kind of growing up. It's like your first coming of age astrologically, right? People who resist that, they struggle during the Saturn return. Now, sometimes people their life just seems slow. Saturn energy is slow. Life seems to suck during that time. And I mean, you have to just work with it. You have to be patient. You have to persevere. Saturn energy perseveres. So it's not going to be, even if you try to be patient and you try to work hard and you try to establish foundations, it doesn't mean it's going to be an easy period. Challenging periods are where we grow the most. So we have to sometimes just accept when things are slow and challenging and work through it as best we can, and you will come out of it. Now, the second Saturn return, which happens, late 50s, 56 to 60-ish in that time frame, approximately 2 years of that for most people. It's much easier than the first one. It depends on how the first one goes, and then of course events in your life. Some people have a midlife crisis. It's kind of a late for one, but a lot of people then are thinking or planning about retirement or wishing they could retire, maybe realizing I got to work longer. But it's usually an easier one because we're much more mature, and Saturn has mature. So planets have maturation ages. And Saturn's, in some places I've read, 36, late 30s, some places 41-ish. But usually by our early 40s, the Saturn energy in our chart has matured. So the second Saturn return is much easier. If you're lucky, you get to 3 Saturn returns, right? So late 80s, 90 years old. And Saturn's energy improves with age. So Saturn actually becomes a benefic, so good, as we get older, and usually after our 40s, because he's fully mature in our chart. It does depend on your life before that, but usually his energy improves over time. So that's a Saturn return. A Saturn opposition happening. So that's when transiting Saturn. So here's the natal Saturn in this chart. Transiting Saturn would be opposite. That can be a challenging time too, because opposite energy, although opposite energy, when working together, complements each other. So the opposing houses and opposing signs ideally work together, rather than like butt head. Let me get that off. Hide. Rather than like butting heads. I do this like the yin yang. Ideally, they can work together, but it can be challenging because it's Saturn energy. So I just lost my spot here. Okay, so depending on your age, so I don't know if you're so 28, 38, 40, early 40s. So that would be when Saturn matures, or you're in the next Saturn opposition. You're probably not 14, right? You're not the first one. Just think about the first Saturn opposition around 14 years old, like awkward teenagehood, right? For a couple of years, really awkward. I guess you could say it could be awkward times. It also depends on your chart, right? So we're talking about isolated things, but it's not looking at angles, especially in Western astrology. Like these are the angles and how the angles affect the invisible transits there. And then in Vedic astrology, they're angles, but they're called drishtis, and they're very specific. Depends how it lays on your chart. It could be very stabilizing. The Saturn opposition Saturn too. So it depends on what houses, what signs, and what other things are going on. Does that help? Does that explain enough? So the opposition is the halfway point between your Saturn returns. Okay, let me catch up here. I'm glad I'm watching it every birthday. I think about what I want to learn over my next year. I decided I wanted to learn about astrology, and thank you. Double thumbs up. Oh, thank you. And even if you're not totally into Vedic, my Vedic book does give lots of information you can apply to Western as well. And it's when I came out with that, and for quite a few years, people asked if I was going to write a Western one, and I thought I would, and I still might, but there's so many Western astrology books out there. I don't know, maybe I will. I have multiple projects. Thank you. Your birthday is early November. Well, happy almost birthday. Cool. And you get I only brought out the study deck. I didn't think that I would need to pull the cards out, but yeah, thank you. Awesome. Good timing. I wish I already had my natal chart. I'm getting mine on Wednesday. Awesome. And there is like these, I have a program for Vedic that I've used for years and years and years, 15 years. It's weird to think that it's that long, but like these charts I pull up on astro.com, astro.com. Can I put that in the work? There you go. Astro.com. I've never commented on my own video before. And I use that for Western. I mean, I've like every other year I look into Western programs, but I'm like, I get what I get for free on Astro, so I just haven't invested in it. So it's free. You can pull up charts. I don't think you even need to sign in to pull up a few charts. Yeah, you can pull up a free chart there, and you can customize it. I was trying to find the right word there. Customize it. Yeah, when I did my Patreon for a bit, I made a video on how to pull up a chart. So I might redo that for you guys. That might be helpful. And there's free Vedic calculators out there as well. I don't know them offhand because I have my program, so I'm not I'm not regularly going to it. Yeah. So do you know any modern Vedic astrologers that include outer planets? I came across, because I'm not really looking at astrologers usually. I'm just inundated with astrology on my own. I came across someone, he had a Russian name. He included them, but his astrology was like a blend of Vedic and Western. And to me, because wait, I have a sunbeam in my eye. There we go. It just looks weird. The sun's going to move. It's weird to mix it because there's certain things about each system that I like that give them their own feel. They're technical things, but it's to me, it's really about a feel when I pull up the charts. So I pull up something like this versus this. I mean, I can in my program put Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto in there, but there isn't ancient text information on it. And of course, not for Western either. It's all modern stuff, but it doesn't make sense. But there was he was Russian name. I can't remember, but you can, I don't know, search YouTube for it. If I can find it, if I have time to kind of search around. Whenever I search for something I've seen in the past, I can never find it on YouTube. But and then sometimes like a year later, YouTube will just pop it up for me. But yeah, the times I've seen it, it's usually some interesting blend of Western and Vedic. And that's so hard to explain because there's so much that overlaps. Yeah, plus there's things in Vedic, like Saturn, because he rules Aquarius, and some of the nakshatras, like Purvabhadra, like in that, they have that energy of like Uranus, earthquake planet, sudden things. Saturn can trigger sudden things. So the energies of those outer planets are in it in a different way. And you might have heard me say this in other videos over the years, especially if you've watched like my Vedic versus Western astrology video, and there might be a couple others out there, where it's not a one-to-one correlation between the two systems. Yes, same signs, most of the same planets, same houses, but okay, so for example, and I give this example a lot, like in Western astrology, I'm a Leo sun. In Western astrology, we go by our sun sign. It's easy to know. You just know month and day of birth for the most part, unless you're on the cusp. And I very much identify with that Leo energy. Where's the Leo energy in my Vedic chart? The Leo energy is my ascendant ruler is in Leo. That's how the Leo energy connects. It's not because my sun is in Leo in Western and my sun is in Cancer in Vedic. Yeah, that clashes. Adjacent signs, adjacent energies, they it's like they rub themselves raw. That's not going to connect. And, I've gotten these comments over the years. You should just ignore them now because there's no point replying because there's tons of comments. But it's on that Vedic versus Western video where people are like, oh, I'm this and this in Western and Vedic. It makes no sense. It's all wrong in Vedic. Or my Vedic sign is this and in Western it's this. It's all wrong in Western. And that's because they're doing the one-to-one correlation. Your moon sign in one, unless you're in that 5-ish degree of overlap, they're going to be adjacent signs. The signs are next to each other and they won't correlate. Those don't. They can't. So you have to find where things fit. Maybe I'll do a video like that. Maybe I'll just do my own chart, or I don't know, where I'm showing where to find a similar energy in the different systems. Because it doesn't line up one-to-one usually unless there is that overlap. Okay. All right. So any modern Vedic astrology that include outer planets? I don't Not off the top of my head. No, to answer your question in a very long-winded, that was sort of a rant, huh? Okay. What are your thoughts on the constellation of Ophiuchus and why it's not included? It's not actually fully in the belt, the zodiac belt. Part of it is. So Ophiuchus is used in the constellational zodiac, and there I have a video on Western or sidereal, tropical, or constellational. And I think the video is called "Is It Necessary to Reconcile the Zodiacs?" I have looked at that and played with it, and it makes sense. And I concluded that would be an interesting layer to add onto a Western chart. Could do it Vedically too, but that felt a little off. But it's not fully in the zodiac belt. It's partially. And another thing, the number 12 is significant. Like the numerology, the 12-base system, to have a 13th sign is a little bit forced. And it's only like, what is it, like 5 degrees or a 5-degree overlap in Sagittarius. Yeah, because I think it's like at the end of Scorpio if you looked at it Vedically. So it's not fully in the belt. And, you know, if you use apps, I have a couple of apps. Some you can see and some it's just pushed in. It depends on if it's an astrology or an astronomy app. So you have to know what you're getting there. But it's not, I mean, like part of it, but it's not fully in there. So that's why it's not included. Plus, there's the number 12 is significant. Yeah, that's important. And then, you know, if you really get into astrology, whether Western or Vedic, when you get into the magical systems associated with it, it just wouldn't work to like try to put in a 13th sign. And I think because that pops up. I mean, I used to be much more active in the blog world, but it pops up in the blog world every few years as this big, like, here's where I like to desensationalize, like, oh my, there's really a 13th sign. It's all wrong, right? It's just circulated through. And then people are like, oh, what's that? And then other people are like, oh, this is all wrong. Because if someone says something's wrong, people jump on it and immediately take that as a truth. When it's like, do your research. It's there. It's partially, part of it sticks in, and it's an interesting thing to layer onto a chart. But again, it's a small portion. You know, yes, the zodiac constellations in the sky aren't all exactly 30 degrees, right? But this is an astrology system. Astrology is based on astronomy, but it's not the exact astronomy. And that needs to be understood. Even Vedic, that's a sidereal system based on where things are in the sky. It's still 30 degrees per house. 12 is an important number here. Okay, I'll stop there. All right, any other questions about planet signs and houses or layering the houses? You can come back and take notes. And then, but I thought I would do, where's the share screen? Can I share screen? Share. I would do simultaneously or pick one and learn it first. I'd say pick one and learn it first, but there's a lot of like all the stuff I've talked about in this playlist, for the most part, you can apply to either system. So, but if you want to dive deep into one, learn those basics that apply to both, and then pick one to dive deeper into. That's what I recommend. But if you can separate in your brain that it's not that one-to-one correlation, that they are two systems that are similar, but they're like two it's like identical twins, but they're two personalities. And you can look at each for the personality it is and not look at them and say, oh, they're both astrology twins, they should be the same. Then you can go for both at the same time. Okay. Yeah, so let me do a sample chart. Share screen, window. Okay. Vedic or Western? Let's do Western because it's a chart for Halloween. And okay, you guys can see that? Can you guys see that? Sharing window, got the chat on the side. Oh, thank you. Separate the two and find something that are different. Okay, too late. I picked Western. Can you see it? You can see it? Okay, so I pulled up a chart for Halloween. I picked sunset for my location. So when an astrologer uses their location, and usually the time the chart's pulled up, but I want to do Halloween sunset, it's called horary method, Horary. Pseudo horary method. Okay. I can't see me, so I'm assuming you can see this. So I pulled up a chart for Halloween just to kind of look at some signs, planets, and house stuff that we already talked about. So at sunset, 6:05 p.m. on Halloween, which is technically so the eve of All Hallows Day, which is November 1st, right? Halloween's energy. So we'll talk about Halloween as if Halloween is a person. Has the ascendant of Taurus. So the house numbers are here in the middle in a Western chart. They're not always put in there. It depends on the style. That's the style I use. But the ascendant starts the first house. So Halloween is a Taurus ascendant. So a very earthy energy. Oh, I haven't done the elements yet, but Taurus is an earth sign. And you can kind of look at the angles. So, but looking at this, so this is the planet Uranus. So it'll be important to learn the symbols, right, of the planets and the astrology signs. But you can find charts online. Uranus is here. That's his little blue line, if you can see that. But basically, so 12 degrees, almost 13 degrees. So each degree has 60 minutes. And 9 degrees, 55 minutes, almost 10 degrees. So within 3 degrees, I call it conjunct. So how I mentioned before, like I look at a 10-degree orb on either side. When I was talking about Saturn return, that Saturn was at 13 degrees. And I said I would look at 3 to 23 degrees. So I have a wide orb of energy, but the closer things are conjunct, because of course ascendant isn't actually a planet, right? But the closer things are conjunct, the stronger the impact on each other. And then as they get further away, it's less and less. But within 5 degrees, it to me, it's tightly conjunct. It looks almost like your natal chart, off by only a few degrees. Interesting. Oh yeah, because Saturn's up here. Very interesting. So what I'm noticing here, and I'm just going to talk about a few things I noticed. I'm not going to do a 2-hour chart reading here, but Uranus is conjunct the ascendant in this chart for Halloween. So what does Uranus represent? So if you have your list, or you go back to the videos and make your list of 3 or 5 keywords for each planet, sign, and house. Like Uranus, the things I typically say off the top of my head right away are earthquake planet, sudden unexpected things, spontaneous energy. You can kind of equate it to like tower energy in the tarot. So Uranus conjoined the ascendant. So it might be quite an eventful Halloween. Of course, it's where I am. This may not play out for everyone around the world because your location is going to shift the ascendant, right? But for people on the west coast of the US, probably like the next couple zones over, you might have this similar energy. So there might be some sudden events. It could be ghosts rising from their graves, who knows, whatever, but some sudden surprising events. Doesn't necessarily have to be bad. And we can look at the angles here. I haven't talked about angles yet, but Uranus here, we'll look at the opposition at least, is opposite the sun. So the sun is right below the horizon. This is sunset. I'll go into that in another video. But it's opposite. So it's like once it gets dark, all the ghosts and ghouls come out. And that could really just be, you know, kids coming out. It could be because I don't know if last year there was anything going on for Halloween because of the pandemic. So it could just be like, whoa, there's a lot going on. That sort of sudden surprise. It doesn't necessarily have to be like anything bad, but it's Halloween, you know. I might get scared by a ghost because this is my location, right? Yeah. So you have Taurus ascendant. Yeah. Other things. So just to kind of review, you know, the signs, right? A chart is read counterclockwise. So Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo. Good to know Taurus is the second sign. So when I, you know, learn the numbers with them, go back to my signs video. The houses here. So 12 signs, 12 houses. And a Western chart, of course, you can see that houses are different sizes. Sometimes it only incorporates one sign. Sometimes it incorporates two signs. Sometimes it incorporates parts of three signs. Some Western astrologers will read like first house here, even though it's Taurus and part Gemini, only as Taurus energy. I actually look at both. But where the house starts, it's going to be the stronger energy of that house. But for example, like in my Western natal chart, I'm a Sag ascendant, but like 29 degrees of Capricorn are in my first house. So it's a strong Capricorn energy for me. And let me know if there's anything you want me to look at in this Halloween chart specifically. And then, of course, we have the planets here. I did add in asteroids because that's how I typically do it. I haven't talked about asteroids yet, but just so you know the symbols. So we have Uranus on the ascendant, first house. It might be a very eventful, surprisingly eventful Halloween here. This is the North Node, also in the first house, but in the Gemini energy and quite far away from Uranus here. Reading this for an event rather than a person is always interesting to read, like the karmic nodes. So North Node here, North Node representing karma, also motivation, the head of the snake in the first house. You could say that there are some destined events to happen. And this doesn't mean around the world. Again, I just put in my location. So it may apply to me specifically or to people in this area. Or like, yeah, destined to come out, destined to be no more shutdown for Halloween. That could be it. Kids out playing. New karmic flow of energy. Some spooky thing that happens, some paranormal thing that happens that's destined to be that kind of energy. Again, it's harder to read the nodes for an event, right? Because events don't take action. And the South Node is opposite. So nodes are always opposite. South Node is here in the 7th house in Sagittarius. South Node representing past karma. Because this is an event, we could say the past Halloweens. And it's in the 7th house of relationships. And South Node also has a withdrawal energy. So you could say in the past, how, you know, like last year, everything shut down. Halloween was withdrawn. You know, there was less connection to other people, house of relationship. There was less things going on. And this year it's like, no, Halloween is going to be here. It's going to be surprising. I kind of get this with Uranus and Taurus as fun, surprising energy. So good spooking. I don't feel bad energy there. And the past of withdrawal, lack of relationships. And this is Hestia Vesta. So goddess of the hearth and home in the 7th house with the South Node. Different signs, but they're still here together. They're 10 degrees apart. In the past, stuck at home, not out and about, trick-or-treating or haunted houses and stuff. So I see that as fitting very nicely. If we look at the moon here, the moon on Halloween. So it's a waning moon. Here in the 5th house. So the moon represents the emotions, emotional mind, intuition for a person, but this is an event chart. So we could say the general feeling around Halloween It's a sign of Virgo, earth sign. Again, I haven't done the elements yet, but very grounded energy. Virgo's, also a sign of the harvest. It's also a sign of healing. So we could say for the event of Halloween, there is a general feeling of feeling grounded. The event feels healed, which you could say is in relation to, say, shutdowns last year, right? The event feels healed. And it's in this fifth house of creativity. So people getting more excited about it, more creative about it. And it's fifth house is house of children as well. So kids getting to have more fun. So I like that feeling there. And I like how this is, we haven't done angles yet, but this is in a nice trine to the ascendant and Uranus, as well as Pluto up here in Capricorn. This is the MC. I'll go through this right here. The MC, I think I mentioned it in the houses video. The MC is the medium coeli, so the midheaven. It's the high point in the chart. It doesn't have to be in the middle. It rarely is, but this is the high point in the chart. This is high noon. I'm making air quotes. I don't know if you can see me. This is high noon. This starts the 10th house of career. So it's, again, this is an event, not a person, so it's a little weird to read it, the MC. But you could say the high point of this Halloween with Pluto here, Pluto, a god of the underworld, is all the spooky stuff. So I think it's going to be a fun Halloween here. For me, for my daughter, for the family. I actually feel like excited about it, and she's going to be doing fun stuff at school, and I'm going to help out. So you can see me. Okay. I don't know how this comes up. So I think it's going to be a fun Halloween and a really good spooky one. So yeah. Anything else you want me to look at, or a planet or a house or something to explain here? Let me switch to the Vedic one. Let's see. Stop sharing. There I am. And I see how it sets up. Okay, share screen. Oh, no. That didn't do that right. There we go. Interesting. I'm picking the Vedic chart. Oh, there we go. Okay, can you see this now? I'm going to move you over so I can see the chat. Okay. So here we have the Vedic chart for Halloween in my location at sunset. So you can see here the ascendant, because first house is on top. House numbers are here on the perimeter, so you can see. Is the sign of Aries, right? So Western, it's Taurus. Vedic, it's Aries. And it's like, yeah, one-to-one correlation. Like, what? But looking at this as an isolated Halloween event, it says moon, but I just punched it into my moon chart place. Anyway, in Vedic astrology, you do this in Western too, but Vedic astrology, the ruler of a house and sign, because it's whole house, whole sign, right? So first house is only Aries, second house only Taurus, third house only Gemini in this chart. There's no 1, 2, or 3 signs per house. It's whole house sign or whole sign house. It's really significant to look at the ruler of that sign and house. So Aries is ruled by Mars. Mars also rules Scorpio. Hold on, folks. Okay, just had to take care of something there. Oh, what happened? Okay, you guys can still see? What did I do there? Okay, I don't know, but here, you can see what I'm doing. That was interesting. Oh, wait, let me see if I can make that bigger for me. Full screen layout? No. Okay, I'll go back to this. So, sorry, we had to block someone. So Aries is the ascendant here in the Vedic chart for Halloween. And Aries is ruled by Mars. So that's like the first thing you look at in a Vedic chart is the ruler of the sign or house. And I'm looking at the ascendant because it's like the start of Halloween, right? The time of sunset. The first house represents the self, the individual. So we could say it represents the event of Halloween, and it's weird to say, but the personality of Halloween. Again, events are always funny to read for, but it works. The Mars ruling Aries here, again, he also rules Scorpio, is in the 7th house of relationships. So where in the Western chart, the nodes connected the 1st and 7th house, where does that connection show in the Vedic chart? The ascendant, the ruler of the 1st house is in the 7th. So that's how you will look for, if you're studying both or you're trying to reconcile both in your mind, that's how you look for the similar energy, not the one-to-one on paper correlation. Thank you, World Bridger. So the ruler of the 1st house for Halloween, the personality of Halloween, is in the 7th house, connecting to other people, house of relationships, being with others or being with the other. And it's the Mars is conjoined the sun here, having fun, shining your joy with other people. And it is the sign of Libra, which is also relationships. And you could say balance with other people, being with other people, having fun, and all this fiery energy. I think there's going to be a lot of parties here, at least where I live. I don't know if this will apply to other places around the world, right? I think there's going to be a lot of joy and merriment and parties. So if we want to look for the year, like in the Western chart, Uranus conjoined the ascendant, right? So surprises, that's kind of like merriment too, like unexpected, not what it was last year. Where do we see that in this chart? So one way to look at it is Saturn's energy. And I know that sounds funny, but really Aquarius energy. And Saturn does rule Aquarius. And Aquarius in this chart is the 11th house. So even though there's not planets, it's okay, Western or Vedic, if a house does not have planets. That's not anything bad. That's not anything to worry about because there's still planetary rulership and so on. And transits still go through houses. So I would look at Aquarius energy to find an energy match to the Uranus conjoined the ascendant in the Western chart, right? So I'm not looking at the ascendant. I'm looking for where does that similar energy play out and does it match? So Aquarius in this chart is the 11th house, which is a house of friends and networking, and you could say partying. So surprisingly merry parties and fun, and yeah, so I would see that as a correlation. Am I making sense here? What else do we want? Let's look at the moon here. So the moon in the Vedic chart is also in the 5th house. So that actually kind of gives a one-to-one correlation that matches up. It overlaps, right? Is there an overlap that matches? Moon in the 5th, different sign, but moon in the 5th house. 5th house, right? Children, feeling good. It's in bright, sunny Leo, ruled by the sun in relationships. So I see that as kids getting together, people getting together, having fun, a good feeling. So I like that quite a lot. And if we look at the nodes here, so the nodes in Vedic, north node is called Rahu, south node is called Ketu. They are on the 2nd and 8th house axis in this chart. So looking from the perspective that this is a chart for Halloween, right? I wouldn't normally say this for like reading someone's natal chart, but because this is a chart for Halloween, Ketu, also known as South Node, in the sign of Scorpio in the 8th house. Scorpio and 8th house are death, transformation, the esoteric, the occult. It is graves and graveyards and everything buried underground, including graves, but also archaeology, paleontology, all that stuff. K2 representing the past. I'll just say past, because normally past karma, but it's not a person, right? I guess you can kind of say that, but the past. I see this energy again, only saying this because it's a chart for Halloween and a natal chart. I don't know if I'd feel this energy, but really, I guess I'll say this easy access to connecting to the dead this Halloween. And you could see this type of energy is a very thin veil. So I don't know if people have been feeling that out there. Is the veil feeling like it's getting thinner and thinner this year? I think it's because things are more open. Like last year, like I think most of the world was still in lockdown. Some places might still be, but when things are locked down, like, you know, the time when the veil is thin, like we're not connecting to it. We're locked in our homes, right? So because it's a big contrast from last year, I feel a lot of people are going to be able to connect to the dead, connect to ancestors, connect to those that have passed on. Scorpio and eighth house are also both represent, because Scorpio is the eighth sign, right? Eighth sign, eighth house, the esoteric, the occult, the metaphysical. You're feeling it especially thin. Yeah. Which is interesting because, yeah, there's another video I want to make for my channel. It has to do with that. Hopefully I'll have time to do it because it's a creative one and they take a lot longer. People more into like exploring the occult this Halloween, which could be tarot cards, it could be Ouija boards, it could be all sorts of things, right? So, yeah, very, and this is, you know, Scorpio is intense in eighth house, very intense energy when it comes to connecting to those who have passed on. Now, K2 can also represent spiritual seeking. So a lot of people may really feel drawn into exploring Halloweeny or witchy or more esoteric things this time of year. Again, this may just be locally, it may just be me, which is true. But it may be, you know, other people out there as well. And then Rahu, also known as North Node, up here in the second house, the sign of Taurus in this chart. Rahu representing karma that is being put into action. Again, it's not a person chart, it's an event chart. So we could see like what's coming out of this, or what you could even maybe even say like a result of this Halloween, what karma will come from this. In the second house of gains. And so second sign Taurus, second house, similar energy. So it's like doubling the energy when they line up perfectly like that. Great things to gain. I mean, it is a very material house, especially Vedically. I mean, I guess there could be financial gain. It could be a lot of candy gain. Candy is something physical. So maybe my daughter is going to bring home a lot of candy from school. She's not quite ready to go trick-or-treating out there. I don't think. She's probably going to be asleep. But it could just be, you know, it's Taurus energy, which is luxurious. Taurus is ruled by Venus, and Venus in this chart is down here in the ninth house, spirituality. So it could be gains of spiritual gains. But what I'm feeling, because there's always like, to me, there's always these kind of psychic read on it. What I'm feeling is that a lot of like just feeling good, luxurious, but not in like like jewels or anything luxurious, but like luxurious energy in being in tune with the season and having fun, enjoying it, feeling the energy of people out there, feeling a deeper connection to those who have passed, or the past, or more esoteric things or witchy things. And just, I kind of want to, just, it sounds cheesy, but happiness to gain from this Halloween and the Halloween events. So that's what I'm picking up there. May we change the topic though? Can you talk a bit? Yeah, so I'll stop the sharing. And let's go back so you can see my little witches up there. So World Bridger, how are we on time? We're on an hour. A little, what happens during a Uranus opposition happening in one's natal chart? So Uranus opposition happens. So are you also Uranus opposition and Saturn opposition right now? Uranus oppositions, Uranus takes 84 years to go around the sun, approximately, right? And opposition is a halfway point, usually around 41, 42 maybe 43, depends, because there's retrogrades and that shifts the time frame and stuff. So Uranus opposition is also another one of those midlife crisis points. And the second Saturn return can be one for some people. But yeah, so you're having Uranus opposition and Saturn opposition, because those would most of the time happen around the same time or in some overlapping years there. It can last a long time. So Uranus is in a sign for like 7 years. So depending on how he's moving and if he retrogrades where he's opposite your Uranus, right? So it could last like a few years. It can be, sometimes it can be a tumultuous time. That's all relative to what's going on in your life and in your community, in your world, and your family, right? But because Uranus is that earthquake energy, sudden, unexpected events, but they can be great. It could be like something great happens and something bad happens, like things that aren't planned, or things you don't, maybe like things you hope for, and you just don't expect it to happen. But they can be very difficult times where great challenges arise. That doesn't necessarily mean, sorry, there's a loud airplane going by. Doesn't necessarily mean like bad things will happen to you. It can be an internal process. And that depends on the houses that these lay in your chart. But for example, when I had Uranus opposite Uranus, that was, there's videos on my channel a few years back, but that was my very difficult pregnancy and my traumatic labor and the after effects of that. Like, and you could say that, because I didn't really give birth, it was an emergency C-section, but my labor was a Uranus opposite Uranus event. A lot of unexpected things, very traumatic, life-threatening. This doesn't mean that your Uranus opposite Uranus is going to be life-threatening, but they can be just really unexpected, difficult things or unexpected good things. Again, it depends on the houses, and then, because this would be Western, the angles, what's angling it, what other transits are doing to it at different times during the opposition, because it can last a few years, again, depending on retrogrades. It's usually not quick. It's usually at least a couple of years. And next year I'm having a Rahu Ketu return. That's actually great. I like Rahu Ketu return. So that happens about every 19-ish years. And that's a whole new karmic cycle. So if you're looking at your Western chart with Uranus, or you're adding it to your Vedic, you still have Saturn opposite, like there's a lot going on. It could be a big transitional time into a new karmic cycle. And when you're approaching those nodal returns, so Rahu Ketu return or North Node, South Node return, how you go into the next cycle is very much going to determine the energy of the next cycle. So keep that in mind. Don't go into it angry or bitter or resentful. Work on resolving that karma as you're approaching the return, so you can have a better outlook into the next karmic cycle. So it can be fun times. Again, it could all be like, it could be a period of great, I'll say absolving of karma, but it's really about learning lessons and growing, right? A period of learning a lot of lessons of your life of the past, 19, 20 years, or even since your Saturn return, and with having that foundation, and then be able to build a new karmic cycle on top of it. Because with Rahu, North Node, it's your actions now, right? You have a lot of free will in how that karmic energy goes into motion. So keep that in mind as you go into it. Okay, you have a lot going on, but it could be actually a really good, maybe not while you're in it, but it can turn out to be a whole new life, like a whole new rebirth. Again, I don't know what houses and all the other stuff that's going on. Okay, so it's been an hour. I always feel like I'm very rambly. Any questions on anything, or if you watched my retrogrades video yesterday, anything else, anything that was confusing or not clear? Otherwise, I will sign out. I'll give you a minute to add questions in. Thank you, everyone who's here. You're welcome. Thank you for being here. All of you. Make sure I didn't miss any. Did I miss any questions? I might have. I think I got them all. I think I got them all. But if I missed a question, let me know now. You're welcome. Yeah, I'll probably do maybe a live once a month. I don't know. I shouldn't say that, because then like I either don't do it or I do more than that. Whatever. I'm here when I'm here. All right, I'm going to sign out. Thank you guys. Have a wonderful weekend and have a great Halloween. All right, see you soon.